Abuja was abuzz with its usual fervor, the bustling streets, the cacophony of honking cars, and the hum of a city that never sleeps were as familiar as the air itself to Tolu. Her life in this metropolitan oasis was idyllic, or at least it seemed so far from the outside. Her husband Femi worked as a senior executive in a renowned oil company in Lagos, a position that brought wealth and prestige but also distance. The arrangements had been simple. Femi would stay in Lagos during the weekdays and returned to Abuja for the weekends. It was a routine that had become second nature to Tolu and their 4 children: Ayo 12, Shade 9, Kunle 6, and Dara 3. Tolu had built a world around the fortress of her home, a serene enclave in the heart of Abuja. The children were her life, and their laughter filled the house with warmth, masking the void left by Femi's frequent absences. Despite the geographical distance, Tolu felt a bond with her husband, strengthened by their mutual love and understanding, or so she thought. One ordinary Friday evening, as the family gathered in the living room for their weekly movie night, Femi arrived from Lagos. His presence was usually a source of joy and relief, but that night, an unusual tension radiated for him. He greeted the children with a forced smile and ushered them to bed earlier than usual. Tolu felt a knot of anxiety tightened in her chest. Something was off. Once the children were asleep, Femi took Tolu's hand and led her to their bedroom. He seemed agitated, pacing back and forth, avoiding eye contact. Finally, he stopped and knelt down before her, a gesture so out of character that it made Tolu's heart race. "Tolu, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. I've made a terrible mistake." Tolu's mind raced, conjuring all sorts of scenarios, but nothing could have prepared her for what came next. "Have been seeing someone else, and she's pregnant. She's threatening to expose everything unless I send her abroad and cover all her expenses." The words hit Tolu like a physical blow. She staggered, feeling the room spin around her. Femi's confession felt surreal, a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. But as she listened, shock gave way to a bitter, ironic amusement. Femi had no idea that his confession was based on a lie, his own lie. As it turned out, Femi was medically impotent, a fact Tolu had discovered years ago. He had no knowledge of this because she had kept it a secret out of fear and love. Their children were not biologically his, a truth that gnawed at her conscience daily. The irony of the situation was almost too much to bear. Femi, thinking he had fathered a child with another woman while being unaware that the children at home were not his own. Tolu's initial shock turned to anger, then confusion. The woman must be lying, trying to trap Femi for his money and status. But what could she do? Revealing the truth about Femi's condition would mean exposing her own deception. The thought terrified her. "Femi," she said, her voice steady but cold, "how could you? We have built a life together, and now this?" Femi looked defeated, his shoulders slumped. "I'm sorry, Tolu. I was weak. I don't want to lose you and the kids. That's why I came clean. I can't afford to send her abroad. It would ruin us financially. I want to invest in our family, not waste money on a mistake." Tolu nodded, her mind racing. She knew she had to act quickly to protect her family and their fragile peace. "I will forgive you," She said slowly, "But we need to handle this carefully. No need to send her abroad. Let's deal with this quietly without disrupting our lives." Femi's relief was palpable. He hugged her tightly, whispering words of gratitude and promises of change. But Tolu felt none of the warmth she usually felt in his embrace. Instead, she felt cold, hollow, and terrified of the secret she harbored. As days turned into weeks, Tolu's life became a twisted ballet of lies and pretense. She pretended to forgive Femi, pretended to be at peace, all while the guilt of her own deception gnawed at her soul. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of her children and the lies they were built upon. She couldn't confide in anyone. Her best friend, Kemi, would never understand. The shame of revealing that her children were not biologically Femi's was too much to bear. She was trapped in a prison of her own making. The walls were closing in. One evening, as she sat alone in the living room, Femi's voice echoed in her mind again. "I want to invest in our family, not waste money on a mistake." The irony was bitter. Every day, she watched him doting on the children, unaware of the truth. How could she continue living with this lie? But then, a terrifying thought struck her. What if the woman wasn't lying? What if there was a way Femi could have fathered a child? She shuddered at the thought but dismissed it. No, the doctors had been clear. It was impossible. The weeks dragged on and Tolu's anxiety reached a breaking point. She needed to confront the other woman to find out the truth. She managed to get the woman's contact information from Femi's phone and arranged to meet her in a quiet cafe. The woman, Sarah, was surprisingly young and beautiful. She didn't seem like the type to trap a man for money. Tolu felt a pang of jealousy but pushed it aside. She needed answers. "Why are you doing this?" Tolu asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Sarah looked at her with a mixture of defiance and sadness. "I didn't plan this, Mrs. Johnson. Femi and I. It just happened. And now I'm pregnant. I don't want to ruin your family, but I won't be ignored either." Tolu felt a surge of anger. "Do you even know who you are dealing with? Femi is medically impotent. He can't father a child." Sarah's eyes widened in shock, and Tolu saw a flicker of doubt cross her face. But then Sarah shook her head. "That's impossible. The doctors confirmed it. I am 3 months pregnant and Femi is the father." Tolu's heart raised. Could the doctors have been wrong? No, that was impossible. But as she looked at Sarah, she saw the conviction in her eyes. The woman believed she was telling the truth. Her mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. What if Sarah was telling the truth? What if there was some other medical explanation that the doctors had missed? She couldn't shake the feeling that her entire world was crumbling around her. At home, she confronted Femi. "I met her," she said, her voice trembling. "She says she's pregnant with your child." Femi looked at her stunned. "You what? Why would you do that?" Tolu's eyes filled with tears. "Because I needed to know the truth. You've been lying to me, Femi. All these years, I've been so supportive and loyal to you. And now, you are telling me there's another woman and a child involved?" Femi's face turned pale. "Tolu, I swear, I never planned it out to come like this." She was just manipulative. Please forgive me and let's correct this together. Well, apparently it has happened. Tolu snapped, her voice filled with bitterness. Now we have to deal with this, right? The room was silent. Femi sat down, burying his face in his hand. Tolu felt a wave of pity for him, but it was quickly replaced by anger. The audacity she still have. Days turned into weeks, and the tension in the house was unbearable. Tolu avoided Femi as much as possible, throwing herself into taking care of the children and maintaining the facade of a happy family. But inside, she was crumbling. One evening, as she was putting the children to bed, she had a knock on the door. It was Sarah. Tolu's heart sank. She didn't want to deal with this now, but she had no choice. Sarah looked anxious, holding a piece of paper in her hand. I went to the doctor, she said, her voice trembling. I thought you should see this. Tolu took the paper and read it. Her eyes widened in shock. It was a paternity test. Femi was indeed the father. The doctors had been wrong. Her entire world shattered in that moment. She had kept a secret for so long, believing that Femi was incapable of fathering a child. And now this? Tolu felt the room spinning. She sank into a chair, her mind reeling. How could this be? How could she have been so wrong? The weight of her own lies and the truth she had discovered crushed her. Sarah looked at her, tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, Mrs. Johnson. I didn't want this to happen, but it is the truth. Tolu felt a surge of anger and frustration. She stood up, her eyes blazing. You think this is easy for me?